Just a little bit of background to this. For the last 4 years, we've done an annual event which some of you may attend, which is an address by the Mayor of Bristol, first of all Mayor George Ferguson and now Mayor Marvin Rees, when we call it the State of the City Address. And this really works in the sense that it gets a big group of people together to listen to what the Mayor's priorities are, the plans are, and to promote a debate around that. We'll be running that again on 18th of October this year as part of our second Festival of the Future City, which if you're on our mailing list, you'll hear about. And we're very keen to do this where we have particularly elected people who have been elected to office to come and talk about their work and to promote discussion and debate around the impact of that work, what it means, but also to help us understand the kind of things that they face in their work. And we were delighted when we had an approach from Aileen and Somerset Police to organise a similar event as we do for the Mayor, with the Police Commissioner, with the Chief Constable and with other guests. And we hope that this will become an annual event taking place pretty much around this time each year. So we're going to have a series of short presentations, and I'll introduce in the panel in a moment. And when you registered for the event, we asked you to submit any questions that you wanted asked. So we've got these questions. We're going to hopefully get through most of them tonight. I'm going to ask them for the panel, and we'll be running that after the presentations themselves. So to introduce our guests, we've got on the far side Sue Mountstevens, who was re-elected in May 2016, to serve as Aileen and Somerset's independent police. No, May 2015. 16, sorry, to serve. There's been so many elections, and I bet there's another one just round the corner coming up. As Aileen and Somerset's independent police and crime commissioner for the second time, one of only a handful of women PCCs, and even fewer independent PCCs. How many independent PCCs? Three independent PCCs.
But I'm the only female independent.
So, very welcome, Sue. Next to Sue is Andy Marsh, Chief Constable of Aileen and Somerset Constabulary. And then next to Andy is Mr. G, a poet, writes current affairs poems for BBC Radio and National Prison Radio, and has carried out a number of poetry workshops. And then next to Mr. G is Aileen Edwards, Chief Executive of Second Step, which is a group helping homeless people in Bristol, self-help, housing action group. Sorry, she previously worked for the self-help housing action group and worked for 10 years in Women's Mental Health Collective, and is now the CEO of Second Step. They'll be talking about their work in the presentations and in the questions. So would you welcome our panel tonight? Thank you. So we're going to start with Sue Mountstevens too.
Good evening, everyone. Do you know how many people are in prison? Over 85,000 people, nearly the size of Bath. 30 years ago, it was only 40,000. And do you know that of the 85,000 that are in prison, nearly half will reoffend when they come out? So tonight, when we talk about breaking the cycle of crime, it's not what we could do, it's not what we should do, but it's about what we must do. We cannot continue doing the same thing time after time and expect a different result. We can't keep putting people into prison and expect that they will come out and not offend. So we need to do something different. We need to, for the sake of the victims, for prisoners, families and children. So I'm Sue Mountstevens. I'm Aileen Somerset's first Police and Crime Commissioner since 2012. I was a magistrate for 15 years and I spent 4 years on the Independent Monitoring Board at Bristol Prison. And tonight I will talk about how we can do things differently, and particularly about two schemes in Aileen and Somerset focusing on drugs education and women offenders. How the Chief Constable is leading the way in predictive analytics, and how a variety of great organisations are delivering amazing opportunities. I'm a mum and I'm a grandma, and I care about my family being safe. I care about my neighbours being safe. about our communities being safe. I care about victims being safe and feeling safe again. And I suspect you do too. But I've seen how crime destroys hope, destroys opportunity, destroys life. And these are some of the reasons that I ran for public office. The reason that I put my head above the parapet to be Aileen Somerset's first Police and Crime Commissioner. From my time as a magistrate, I remember the fear in people's eyes when they stepped into the courtroom. The dread from victims as they had to relive the horror and repeat their story yet again. But I also remember the blank faces of those defendants that were being put into custody. I remember the very first time that I stepped out of Bristol Prison and I walked down Gloucester Road. I could smell the fresh air. I could almost feel it. I took that smell in and thought of the people that I had just met who were still inside. If you've ever been in a prison, you will know that it has its own sound, its own chorus of clanging, of banging, the clattering of keys and the slamming of doors. Through every sense, you know you are incarcerated. You know there's no escape. And prison shouldn't be a holiday camp. It's a severe punishment. But what is prison for? It's there to take away a person's freedom as a punishment for breaking laws. It's there to keep dangerous people off our streets and to keep our communities safe. It's there as a concrete built reminder of the consequences of committing crime. But none of this is prison's purpose. The purpose of every prison should be that when each prisoner is released, they are less likely to commit offences when they come out. We should be trying to ensure that people that come into prison do not come back. Because we need to remember, 85,000 people are in prison today. And why is this? I would like to propose that we are not doing enough to help prisoners get the skills they need to fit back into society as law-abiding citizens. Because when you're inside, you are on somebody else's timetable. You cannot make a cup of tea when you fancy. You cannot make what you want for dinner. You cannot tune into your favourite TV programmes. And above all, you cannot think for yourself, day in and day out. People become so powerless inside that they forget how to think for themselves when they come out. They forget how to do things for themselves. Many people come out with low to no self-esteem, respect or hope. I met a young man who I'm going to call Sam tonight, and I will talk about him several times because he left a profound impression on me and I want to share it with you. He had been in and out of prison since he was 14 years old. Some of the times he couldn't even tell me how many times he'd been into prison because he'd been in and out so often. He's now in his 30s. He's never experienced any respect in his life. He's never experienced people listening to what he had to say. He was so low that the very first time we met, he said, "Are you sure you want to sit next to me?" This is shocking. This was a man who had left prison, who had served his time, who had paid his debt to society. He was working, he had somewhere to live, but he did not think he deserved a second chance. Now trust me, people in prisons do have hopes and dreams. They have made profound mistakes, but they are people nonetheless, just like you and just like me. And they need our attention. They deserve our attention. We need education and employment programs in prison which can reach out to people and give them a choice, the opportunity to take a different path. Like Sam, we have all made mistakes, each and every one of us here, and most of us have been given a second chance. This is about being smart in order to make sure people can recover from their mistakes. But it's not about being soft on criminals. We have some excellent projects which are supporting people to earn that second chance. Tonight, the Life Cycle Project, working out of Bristol Prison, have kindly displayed some bikes in the room. You'll see them dotted around, and each tells a story. Please take time to go and read those stories. Life Cycle takes donations of unwanted bikes from local people and teaches prisoners the mechanical skills to strip down, to repair and rebuild. Sometimes I wonder if that's what we should do with prisoners too. Once fixed, these bikes are sold on at affordable prices to help people on lower incomes to get a bike, start cycling and reduce their transport costs. They can also gain City & Guilds accreditation qualification, and some of them will also be able to gain employment as bike mechanics. I've spoken to prisoners who have been given a bike. This is their personal bike which they have repaired themselves, and I've listened to their pride and achievement that they own this bike. Chief Executive Aileen Edwards, who's on the panel, is from the mental health charity Second Step, and she joins us here tonight. Second Step is using their experience working with Bristol's homeless community and people with complex needs on a big lottery-funded programme called Golden Key, which aims to open doors and create new futures for offenders and people with multiple needs. I'm further delighted that the renowned poet, Mr. G, has joined us this evening to talk to you about his work bringing poetry into prison. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Mr. G, and I suspect most of you are, he has a unique ability to express the rawness of life into the written word, spreading his message with those who need it most. And you'll also hear from the Chief Constable Marsh, who will tell you more about the future of crime research work and how the use of big data can help us to identify patterns in the way criminals behave and prevent crime from happening in the first place. But let's just take a minute and think about the effects of prison, how it rips through families, communities, and tears generations apart. Having a criminal record disqualifies you from being a full member of society, even when you've paid your debt. As a consequence of a mistake, you can end up in a cycle of crime. The prospect of recovering, contributing to society, being an active citizen is remote. And we have tens of thousands of people who are not getting a second chance. Sam, the man I mentioned earlier, he works for Timpson's. And Timpson's have been given ex-offenders a second chance since the early 2000s. And it's not easy. James Timpson will openly talk about the mistakes he made in the early days and the things they have learned as a company from the process. But breaking the cycle of crime is hard work. It's hard work for the offender, and it's hard work for those working with the offender. Because if it was easy, we'd have got it right by now. And we haven't. Timpson's work with about 70 prisons in the UK. They have a number of colleagues going around prisons interviewing and mentoring, and they have 3 academies where prisoners can learn the trade. James jokes in the beginning that he had to persuade prison governors that he was only going to teach offenders about shoe repairing, not about key cutting. And other companies are following in their footsteps and giving ex-offenders a second chance, such as Virgin Trains, Boots, Greggs and M&S. Sam, the man I mentioned, it was the little things that made a difference to him. The fact that Timpson's can give a deposit for a flat so you can have a roof over your head. A dry clean suit for your first interview. An alarm clock to get you up in the morning. These small things, because when you've been in prison, you have forgotten how to think for yourself and how to do things for yourself. But this is not about being soft on criminals. This is about being fairer, smarter, and more effective. We also need prevention programs which can reach out to people and give them a second chance, the opportunity to take a different path. Let's just talk about how Aileen Somerset Constabulary is giving a second chance. I will begin by reading you a headline from the Daily Mail a few days ago. quote, "Police force lets off cocaine and heroin users. Top officer denies being soft on drugs after force stopped arresting suspects." This story is about an approach that police decided to take with those people who were caught in possession of drugs, including Class A drugs, onto an education programme rather than immediately criminalising them. Each year, drug addiction costs our society over £15 billion. Any heroin or crack user not in treatment committing crime costs an average of over £26,000 a year. The Drugs Education Programme pilot, run with Swanswell, the National Drug and Alcohol Charity, is an innovative way of dealing with people found in possession of drugs. It's a chance to change a person's behaviour and reduce the likelihood of them committing further offences. It's a chance to provide a pathway for vulnerable drug users to get support. And it's a chance to reduce drug-related crime in our community. And this second chance only happens once. You get one chance to take this education programme. Because if you fail to attend or engage, you will be prosecuted for the original offence. And in the short time since the pilot began, over 400 individuals have taken part in this scheme. And this is the important bit. Not a single one has gone on to commit a crime. So this leads me to the question, is prison really the best place for people who use substances but don't commit crime or violence? According to Her Majesty's Inspector of Prisons, just under 1/3 of prisoners admit that it's easy to get drugs in prison. I think with spice and psychoactive substances, I think it's higher than that. And in fact, it is estimated that maybe up to 90% of people in prison use spice. So this programme, this drugs education programme, tries to reach people before that point, before a caution or a conviction has taken its costs on their lives, lost them their job, broken their family, put them on a road that it's difficult to get off. I believe that it's vital that the police and the criminal justice system have a range of measures available to them to prevent drug use, but that they also have the tools to deal robustly with serious and repeat offenders who cause the most harm in our communities. But let me repeat, it's not about being soft on crime. It's about offering a choice. I've spoken to prison chiefs, judges, magistrates, police officers, politicians, families, victims of rape and abuse, support workers, coaches, and people working on new solutions. And we are all finding new solutions to the problems that we face as a society. So let's just take also a few minutes to talk about women offenders. This month we launched SHE, a scheme designed to divert women from the custody and criminal justice system and help them get support. SHE stands for Support, Help and Engagement, and will move women away from the path of prison to help them tackle the root causes of their offending, which often ranges from drug and alcohol addiction to debt and domestic abuse. In the past 7 months, nearly 3,000 women were brought into custody in Aileen and Somerset. And you may ask why police focusing on this when women only make up 20% of all offenders and 5% of the prison population. And I would say to you, because the root causes of their offending can often be far more complex. I was told only last week by the Governor of Eastwood Park, the prison for women, is that 80% of women in Eastwood Park are victims of domestic abuse. 80%. National figures show how in 2010, over 17,000 children were separated from their mothers by imprisonment. And some will have lost also their family home. So let's just think about that. They've lost their mum, they've lost their home, and we are surprised at the consequences. In addition, the cost of detaining a woman in prison is up to £46,000. Compare that to £1,500 in a community-based centre with better results. So if this new scheme is successful, we could divert hundreds of women from prison during the first year. This would have a significant impact on reoffending. It will reduce the emotional and support and social impact on children and families, and it would ultimately result in financial savings. The SHE scheme is only possible because the police are working with phenomenal agencies such as the Prison Reform Trust, the Nelson Trust, the Eden House Project, who will be the pilot hub for the women at risk. We're very privileged to be in Bristol. We have excellent community services such as the Bristol Drugs Programme, the Sanctuary, the Greenhouse, the Restore Trust, the Golden Key Project, Second Step, Catch 22, and many more. And I would like to very publicly thank you for all that you do. And in a few moments, you will hear from the Chief Constable, Andy Marsh, how the Bobby on the beat is here to stay in Aileen and Somerset. But they will be more targeted, more specific, more walking and more cycling on our streets. But using big data, they will be more effective because that is vital in today's policing. So let's be clear, if it was easy to break the cycle of crime, we could have got it right by now. We haven't, and it's worthy of greater attention. People who are at risk of offending deserve our attention. People in prison deserve our attention. People who come out of prison deserve our attention. They need our attention. Because if we get this right, it means fewer crimes, less money spent on prison, less reoffending, less wasted taxes, fewer police arresting the same people again and again. We will all feel safer, and the next generation will see what it's like to be part of a society when sometimes things go wrong and wrongdoing is committed, but there is a second chance and there is a future. It's people we have to invest in, and we have to do it right now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Sue. We'll go straight into Andy Marsh. Would you welcome Andy Marsh?
So, the festival ideas. What can break this cycle of crime and punishment that Sue has talked so vividly about and personalised? I'm going to talk about the role of the police, the role of Aileen and Somerset, and how we achieve it in a changing world, how we achieve it in a world of changing pressures on police, and how we achieve it in a world of austerity that has delivered cuts of almost 30% to policing, and I know many other public services that are essential partners. So, in summary, I'm going to tell you that we will do this by preserving the very best of British policing. We're routinely unarmed, we're low on powers, we're low on numbers, and we're high on accountability, and thank goodness for all of that, because I wouldn't be in policing were that not the case. So we're going to preserve and protect that, and Sue talked about it. But we're going to do it in a way that combines those traditional values, the best of what we've always done, with a high-tech, savvy, innovative, digitally enabled, diverse workforce. Because in my opinion, all of those things are essential to achieving that goal and that mission. Now, if you can't see all the slides, don't worry, they're there for impact, is what I'm saying, which is the important bit. So what is changing? Globalisation is certainly changing. We can debate when globalisation started, but let's look at 1820 and the start of mass transport of people around the world. It has gathered a pace, and it has a massive impact on policing, and certainly has an impact on community cohesion and offending. Mass media, the internet. When I joined the police in the 1980s, Tim Berners-Lee internet wasn't even a twinkle in his eye. But the internet has delivered mass data and digitalisation. And a changing profile of what the police are required to do. You will recognise some of this, but we've had every 3 years a doubling of the reporting of rape and serious sexual offences. We've had an explosion of issues around vulnerability, particularly around an ageing community, and particularly around children and young people. And we've had the impact of radicalisation and extremism. All of these challenges are complex, and all of these challenges happen predominantly in sometimes a digital space and sometimes a private space. Now, how do we cope with this challenging workforce with a diminished, these challenging changes with a diminishing workforce. And a diminishing workforce that meets a risk-averse society where when something goes wrong, someone or something must be to blame. Now actually data provides us with a forensic audit trail of who did or didn't do what and when and why. All we've done is recorded in data. My instinct of policing is that we will not enforce our way through these problems. And there must be much more to the way we deal with them. And a footnote here as to how we deal with these problems. Society and people have got a responsibility. But significantly, also industry needs to play its part. How is it that in 2015, the Chinese managed to block over 300 websites, including the BBC, and yet we are now paedophiles and extremists, free play to commit crime and cause mayhem on it? So here is some of our big data. Now you'll see some remarkable figures up here. 200,000 offenders you will see that Aileen and Somerset Constabulary are managing. Now how can we possibly do that in that changing world? It's almost an impossible task, isn't it? And part of my message here is that the solution lies in the problem. The solution lies in the problem of all that I've been saying. We either suffer the impact of digitalisation and big data, or we turn it into a solution and we manage it. We either suffer the consequences of globalisation, or we turn it into the solution and we manage it. And we either suffer the consequences of big data, or we manage it. 1.8 million automatic number plate hits every single day that the police could examine. How could we possibly do that? In the days of Dixon and Dockery, that would have all been in the mind of the individual police officer, wouldn't it? It's not possible. So there is some groundbreaking and some innovative work taking place in Bristol with other agencies. You will see some images here that you will recognise. I've recognised these through years of policing. I know that many of you work in social care and the rehabilitation of offenders field. These are images that are now captured by every single police officer on a body-worn video, and every single police officer, police community support officer on a body-worn video as they go in and out of people's houses, as they respond to domestic violence, as they respond to incidents. Now what is the benefit of this? The benefit of this is manifold, but it will enable us to transform the way the criminal justice system works. And I would probably go somewhat further than how Sue's described the criminal justice system. It is full of waste. It is full of reoffending. We simply cannot afford to let it continue at the moment. We could use body-worn video to capture victim accounts at the scene, saving endless hours of paperwork, relieving victims of the pain of having to relive their experiences time and time again, giving evidence in chief. We could use body-worn video to interview offenders to quickly gather an account of what's happened in certain offences. And these are certainly changes that Sue Mountstevens and I have been pressing the policing minister and government to enable. The work that you see here describes a family, and a family with individuals with problems. I would say that this big data, if managed in an intelligent way, will allow us to intervene early. Now, you heard me say that we needed to protect the very best of what British policing does now. Well, we do, and we need to combine it with modern technology. The author of modern policing, as we know it, was Sir Robert Peel. His 9th principle was that the efficiency of policing will be measured by the absence of crime, not the efficiency of the police in dealing with and responding to crime. Success in breaking this cycle of reoffending looks like using intelligent data in a smart way and intervening early to prevent crime. That's what success looks like, and you can see an example of how we're doing it with other partners in Bristol at the moment. Bear in mind that figure of 200,000 that I talked about earlier, offenders that we're expected to manage every single day in Aileen and Somerset. So we've turned all of this data into a series of applications that all of my officers within Aileen and Somerset have got access to. You can see some of the applications here. But this is actually happening now. This is visual analytics combined with predictive analytics. But let's come back to those 200,000 offenders. If you drill down on my database at any time live, and you can do it, it's updated every 15 seconds like that, you will see the individual offending profile of all of those 200,000 people. But it filters them from a very high risk and escalating risk to a very low risk. The police cannot be everywhere all the time doing everything. This is the profile, and it's sanitised for one individual. And it will show you where the individual's offended, the nature of the offending, and the officers can drill down into every single aspect of it. So how does traditional meet modern in this respect? Well, Sue has given me some parameters within which I've reshaped Aileen and Somerset Constabulary to deal with a further £8.5 million of savings that we're delivering in this year. Now, what she's asked me to do is to protect local policing, because she knows how deeply and passionately the public care about a visible and effective police force. So in protecting that local policing of beat managers and PCSOs, and we will not reduce by one officer or PCSO that we fund this year because of that, I'm putting that army of people, hundreds of people, to work managing offenders in the community. And they are expected every single day to access information about the highest risk offenders on their patch, know them, and work with other agencies to prevent reoffending. And they do exactly the same thing around victim management and protecting victims from harm. So, in a globalised society, to summarise, I think there's four things I'm saying are important that we do. One is, we must embrace difference. We must unlock talent, because a wide range of life experience and background is essential, not necessary, it's essential to provide skills and experience and perspective that will enable us to be world-class in delivering police services to the people of Bristol and Somerset. Secondly, austerity. It's a problem. I didn't join policing to take money out of policing, but it's here, so deal with it. And actually, what we will do is use austerity to do some audacious things about what we're going to do and not do to make the very best of every single penny the taxpayer provides us, the police in Aileen and Somerset. We simply cannot afford the status quo, and that includes fueling the cost of reoffending and a prison establishment of about 85,000 people. The third thing is, pressures upon police are changing, many private place pressures, including cybercrime and fraud. Actually, what those pressures are causing us to do is make very difficult but essential decisions about two things. What do we want to be the best in the world at? What are we deeply passionate about? And we are sharpening our pencil to actually answer those questions. And then the third thing is that actually, the fourth thing, all of this philosophy is based around using adversity and the problems that you're presented with to give you the solutions. This philosophy comes from the last of five who were regarded as good Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius. He was regarded as good despite his persecution of Christians. Nevertheless, what Marcus Aurelius said is the obstacle is the solution. And you will see what I've given you here is the obstacle to effective policing is the solution through which we will provide excellent world-class solution, which is about preventing reoffending. So rather than be risk averse, rather than expect my police officers and police staff to find a needle of risk in a haystack, whether that's about an offender that needs to be managed to de-escalate, or whether that's about a victim who's incredibly vulnerable, and whether that's about the two people when they come together, bad things inevitably will happen. Rather than expect them to find that needle in the haystack, we will use predictive analytics to drive our decision making at every level, and that's what the vision says there. Aileen and Somerset Constabulary will preserve the very best traditions of pillion policing, and we will combine it with an innovative, diverse, strong risk appetite police force to protect people from harm. Thank you very much.
Number 7, Mr. Marsh.
Hang on.
Sorry, I was just wondering about number 7. It says about using force as the police force.
Police use minimum force as necessary.
Yeah, could you repeat number 7?
The pillion principle is the seventh principle, is the police will use a minimal force as is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. One of the principles we operate in terms of our work is always to try and have poets actually speaking. So we're delighted when Mr. G was offered to us tonight and who's going to talk about some of the work that he does. Would you welcome Mr. G?
Thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Okay, this is going to be interesting. First, I'm a poet, so I may as well tell you what I'm not. I'm not a policeman. So my job isn't to get called out on 999 calls. My job isn't to stop and search. My job isn't to compile evidence. My job isn't to arrest or charge or deal with the public on that level. I'm not a judge, so I do not sit in the courtroom. I do not evaluate the evidence of the prosecution and the defense, and according to the conviction of my own heart, I do not allocate sentences which then determine the future of the defendant in front of me. I'm not a prison warden, so that means that prisoners are not put into my care. I do not receive new admissions. I do not search them for drugs. I do not have to deal with suicides. I don't have to deal with gang violence on the wards. I am in no way, form, a figure of authority for the inmates inside. What I am is literally just a poet. I put nice, pretty words together, and that's what I do. So the path that led me into working in prisons was not a direct path. I was doing lots of little shows and working on, I had some people know me from working on the Russell Brand show, some people know me from working on Radio 4, and I just put nice little pretty words together, and everything was nice and fine. And I also used to do school workshops. I remember one of the first school workshops I ever did was in the area of Brixton, and we did it, and it was in this estate, and we were putting on this anti-drug, anti-gun campaign, and I remember that we had all these kids come in, and I was getting them to write poems, and everything was really, really cool, and there was this one kid who used to come in really, really early and help set everything up, and it was like, this was 2003, so like I just started doing poetry, and I was like, wow, I'm doing something really, really good for the community. I felt like a sense of community spirit, and we put on a show, and Ken Livingston came down, and the Chief of Police, the Metropolitan Police in London came down, and it was fantastic. And then after that, my poetry career blossomed. I found myself, many years later, I was in a West End show, performing in front of thousands of people every single night. As I said, I was writing comedy helping write comedy for Russell Brand and on his show. And I was doing lots and lots of things, working on Radio London, doing lots and lots and lots of things. And then one day, I just got off the stage from the West End, and someone approached me and just goes, oh, you know what would be really good is if you come into Feltham Young Offenders Institution and just give a little talk about the kind of stuff you do. And so I thought, yeah, sure, right, fine. Now, I won't say I've never been into a prison before. Fortunately, I've had friends of mine that have gone down certain paths in life and had to visit them, but I've never had to be in front of a group of offenders. And so there I was in Feltham, this is 2008 now, and I'm talking to all these kids, 18, 19-year-olds, right? And then I looked in the crowd, and I saw one of them, I was like, wait a minute, I know you. And it was the same kid from 2003 who was on my first workshop ever. The same kid that used to come here early, and used to help set everything up and make us cups of coffee and stuff like that, and help sweep up afterwards, right? And I was like, what are you in here for? And he was in for double murder, he killed 2 people. Between the age of 13 and 18, he got involved in a whole heap of gangs and drugs and stuff like that. And usually, I was of the mindset where, if someone ends up inside, you can just write them off, right? You can just say to yourself, okay, bad apple, bad egg, forget about him, lock him up, throw away the key. But this kid, I knew him before. I knew him, I knew I worked with him, I know the potential he had, I know the enthusiasm he had, I know the spirit of him. And it was literally a case where he couldn't escape his environment. His environment was, I guess, stronger than he was. And that's what set me on the path into working in prison. I thought to myself, it's all well and good just prancing about doing jazz hands on stage, right? And it's all well and good hanging out with the BBC radio crew and sipping cocktails and stuff like that. But part of me felt in my heart that I failed that child. Don't ask me why, I just felt I failed him, because I felt I knew him before, and I could have said something or done something, or something in me had to try and redress that. So what I did was that the local prison to me was Brixton, and I just went in there and I started to volunteer and just said, look, let me come and just do some workshops with you guys, right? And just start chatting. And in Brixton we've got National Prison Radio. Now, National Prison Radio is a wonderful charity organisation, and they broadcast shows in, I think, about 80 prisons up and down the UK. And so you've got prisoners making radio programs for prisoners. And then sometimes they might even interview someone on the outside to see how they're getting on the outside. So it's got the general, shout out, there's a lot of bravado, there's a lot of guys and stuff like that, but they actually do interviews and they actually manage to talk about some of the issues that pertain to them to try and create a sense of community. And so I found myself working with prisoners in Brixton. But again, I was faced with another real, I would call it almost an existential problem, right? Because I'm not a policeman, I'm not a prison warden, I'm not a judge, I'm not part of the long arm of the law, but I like to see myself as being part of the olive branch of rehabilitation, in the sense that I believe that everyone that has committed a crime, and they've gone through the sentencing process, they've gone through everything, they're inside, they're in jail, you've got a young man, or not young man, but you've got a man or a woman that's inside the correctional institution. They're in there 24 hours a day. What do you do with them, right? What is it? Society has put them in there, has allocated that you are now going to be put away for this period of time, and that's your penance. But now, what is going to be the olive branch from society to allow that person to come back and reintegrate themselves into society? And that is a very, very difficult question, because I'm pretty sure that most people in this room, either you've been a victim of crime, or you know someone who's been a victim of crime. And obviously, when crime is enacted upon you or enacted upon the people that you love, it creates an emotion. And that emotion is usually, if we're honest, hate. I found myself talking to someone in Brixton who had shot my friend's cousin. As soon as I saw him, I walked in, I saw him, I was like, wow, I know this guy, right? And this guy he was like 19 years old, minimum sentence 21 years. And I had to teach him. And so I had to inform the wardens and say, look, I've got a personal connection with this guy, since I know the person he killed, I know their cousin. And so you have to fill out all these forms and stuff like that, right, just in case something goes wrong. And I remember sitting down, looking at this guy, just thinking, okay, it's all well and good me having this beautiful, wonderful belief in reform and rehabilitation, but what do I do to suppress that feeling of hatred that I had, in the sense that I don't want to talk to this guy, I don't want to be around him, I don't want to see him, I don't want to know him, right? And then I looked in his eyes, and again, as I guess Andrew would verify, sometimes you're dealing with kids. Do you know what I'm saying? You are dealing with young men that are they just got that same wide eye that you remember having, that barely any hair here. Do you know what I'm saying, right? And you just look and think, how are you capable of doing these type of things, right? And I remember just thinking to myself, okay, this person, he is worthy, as we all are worthy, of a chance to reintegrate himself back into society. He's facing 21 years. He ain't getting out until he's in his late 30s, right? The biggest part of his life is going to be gone. But somehow, some way, there has to be some arm of society that can welcome that person back in. Otherwise, what we have is a situation where young men are just going in, they're locking them up, throwing away the key. When I say young men, I mainly deal in male prisons, right? And then they're just forgotten about, and then their only socialization and their only love and their only sense of community and their only sense of compassion comes from other inmates, right? And you put 4 or 5 inmates together and having a conversation, crime enters the situation, right? Because that's all they know. They go out, there's no chance of a job, friends have moved on, girlfriends have moved on, baby mothers don't want to know them, family don't want to know them, right? And so the only thing that they've got left is each other, and the only way they've got to make money then becomes crime, and then bang, they're back in again and again and again and again and again. And so it's a I don't know, there has to be some form of, I don't know, like, I would say government-led procedures. Because right now, what we're dealing with is there's loads and loads of charities. I get employed by charities. Even National Prison Radio is a charity, right? There are loads and loads of charities that are going in and doing amazing work, and there might be some government grant that just comes in. All these charities then fight for this grant, right? And this one's edging this one aside, and this one's edging this one aside, and they go and do something. You have a program that lasts maybe, I don't know, a couple of months, and then bang, it's over, and that's it. These guys have been there for years. And there has to be something, even if it's just like, what I mainly deal with is just literary skills, right? Just simple things like filling out a CV, simple things like being able to articulate yourself, simple things like being able to just put forward a point of view in terms of being able to speak in an interview setting, right? These are skills that many people have never ever acquired, never ever had a chance to acquire through the school system. And so when they come out, they are at a loss until the only thing, as I said, that beckons them is crime. So the work I was doing in National Prison, with National Prison Radio, we then put a series of shows that then got onto Radio 4, was we went up and down the country, and I was doing my workshops at different correctional institutions with people who were in different stages of their life. So the first place we went to was a young offenders institution. It's called Brinsford. It's in Wolverhampton. And so you go in there and you're mainly dealing with guys that are, like, say, in their late teens, early 20s, and you're talking to them about what's gone wrong, systems in life and stuff like that. I remember there was one guy, and he was a drug dealer, and he was saying to me that, like, the amount of money that he makes doing drugs, he can't make that in the normal world. And so I sat this guy down, and we did like a profit and loss account. And so I said to him, okay, when do you start drug dealing? Just tell me the moment you start drug dealing. And he goes, from the moment I wake up. So let's say, okay, what time are you waking up? He goes, 11 o'clock. Okay, so let's say 11 o'clock. When do you stop? And he just goes, well, I've got to catch the guys after the nightclub, so really about 3 o'clock in the morning. So my man's doing some serious shits here, right? You know? And so we then just calculated how much money he made, right? And then we can calculate how long he'd been inside. This guy'd been inside 4 times. He's 20 years old, been inside 4 times, right? And I sat down with this guy and I said to him, you do realize if you worked at McDonald's, right, for that period of time, and for the hourly rate you've been working at, you would have made the same amount of money, right? And it's little things like that that I know that it sounds so basic and it sounds a little bit crass, but sometimes you actually have to put things in a language which people understand to make them think, wait a minute, this ain't working for me. This really isn't working for me, right? So we spoke to those guys, but what I tend to find is that with the young men, they were like full of vigor, full of life, right? They would like argue against you. They would say, I'm not going to talk to you, blah, 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 because they were still getting conversations from people on the outside, girlfriends were still contacting them, all those type of things, right? And so there was like a sense of vibrancy. Then we went to Style in Manchester, and that was a female prison. And whoa, that is stark. That's real stark, because you're dealing with, you know, when you incarcerate a woman, in many cases you are taking the main family member out and you're leaving behind devastation. You know, either the children she has have to go with grandma or they end up in care. And you're dealing with this awful lament, this awful feeling of failure. And Sue was saying that, like, a lot of them are inside from reacting to domestic violence. So it's not even that they were the perpetrators of an actual crime. They were reacting to a crime put it onto them, and they lashed out, or they wanted to get into jail just to escape a partner. So you're dealing with that kind of level. And so the kind of talk that we were talking about was more about trying to hold on to family, trying to hold on to a sense of family. All the stuff they wrote about was trying to hold on. And there was one lady, I remember, she was so ashamed that she didn't want her daughter to know that she was in prison, that she said she was working in, I think, a holiday resort in Spain. So what she would do was that her friend would send her a postcard from Spain. She would then write the postcard, send it back to Spain, and then have it sent to her daughter. Right? Because she just didn't want her daughter to know she was inside. So you're dealing with all these type of things. Then the next place we worked in was that was Brixton, and that's where you're dealing with guys with long sentences. You're dealing with older men, and the difference between the older men and the younger men is that the sense of hope is starting to slip. Because as I said, their sense of family, they've broken too many promises. Mom and dad don't want to know them anymore. Girlfriends don't want to know them anymore. The kids they got don't want to know them anymore. The friends they had don't want to know them anymore. Everything has moved on. Everything has moved on. You know, I met this one dude, he'd been in and out since 1986, and he spent his 50th year inside. And he got on our radio show, which then got broadcast on Radio 4. He wrote a poem called Look Mom on Radio 4, right? You know what I mean? And then you're seeing the despondency and the realization that kicks in that, wow, this life ain't working. There's nothing left. There's nothing left. There's nothing left. Right? That was real depressing. Then we went to what's called you have these halfway houses where when people come outside prison, they then try and get together, and as I said, it's trying to keep yourself straight, because once you get out, the path to go back in is so easy that you need to almost force yourself to stay straight. So you have these little communities, little community groups. And again, these things aren't funded, they're just done voluntarily by the ex-offenders themselves, right? To just try and say, how you getting on? Is everything all right? How did that job interview go? How's things going? What's happening with your flat? Are they taking it away? Well, you know, how are you handling the debt? How are you handling rent? How are you handling credit? How are you handling all these things? And so there was a bunch of guys in there, and I remember there was one dude, he was Scottish, and he did a crime where he got put away for 5 years, but he kept fighting in prison, so his prison sentence got extended to like 25 years. And he just said to me, I just don't know what I was doing. I don't know what I was doing. And so we got them to write poems. So then the final place we went to was in, you guys seen the film Trainspotting, right? There's a place just outside Edinburgh, it's called Leith. And that's where Trainspotting was filmed. And there's this road, I think it's called Pennywell Road. And on one side you've got Muirhouse Estates, and on the other side you've got Piltdown Estates, right? These two estates have been fighting for like 30 years. I'm talking generational fighting, right? I'm talking like dad's fault, granddad's fault, great-granddad's fault over this road. And so there's a school there, and there's like a 1 in 10 chance of being incarcerated, right? 1 in 10 chance in the school. And so we went to these kids there, and we just talked to them about their, you know, what's your life like, right? And they were just talking about how they're just fighting over this road, and they just, my dad's in jail, my granddad was in jail, my great-granddad was in jail, that type of mentality. And we played them some of the poems that were written by the older prisoners, and some of the poems that were written by the men that had got out and were in these halfway houses, and we played it to them, and there was just this realization of, it's almost like when you just, you know, in the Matrix, you start seeing the ones and zeros come together, like, oh my God, this is a trap. This is a trap that I'm being trapped into. And so, when I talk about rehabilitation, it really is, it's almost like a spiritual thing. I know that it's very hard to try and look past the crimes people have committed. But as I said to you, I'm not the judge. I don't evaluate the evidence, right? I'm not the warden. So I'm not having to deal with the yelling and the screaming at night, do you know what I'm saying, right? I'm not the policeman, I'm not the guy that arrested them. But there has to be something in society that allows people to try to make their lives better. Don't get me wrong. I've met people who I'll just offer them the chance to get on board on the course, and I'll offer them little bits of advice on how to deal with their lives, but they're not interested, right? You know what I mean? You can't, you lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? And I appreciate that. But what happens for the people that have that moment of realization, you know, on the road to Damascus, and just think to themselves, this has to stop, this has to end. I don't want to be this person. I don't want to be one of them old dudes that's on the wing, getting beaten up all the time, getting their money taken all the time, and just coughing out of breath, just begging people just for a little bit of cigarettes, begging people for a little bit of drugs, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to be that old dude. I'm still young, I've still got a little bit of a chance. There has to be something put in place. And so that's really where my mindset is at. My mindset is all about trying to, when we talk about you know, dealing with criminals, because I did some work in Scotland, there's a thing called the Violence Reduction Unit, right? This is the thing I'm going to finish up, right? Violence Reduction Unit. They were doing some amazing stuff before the austerity cuts, right? They had this thing where, in order to alleviate your sentence, you could work 3 months at an old people's home, helping them with their gardening, right? Here's the interesting thing. A lot of guys, they'll come out and they'll think, all right, then I'll just do the 3 months and I'm gone, right? Some guys would actually stay 6 months because they just figured, okay then, right, I can actually work out the term even longer, so I'll stay 6 months. Of the ones that stayed 6 months, about, realistically, 30% decide to stay for the whole year, right? So they're not even getting their little wage or any like food money or anything, do you know what I'm saying? They just like to work in a old people's home and just plant strawberries and all that kind of stuff, right? Of the ones that went beyond 6 months, of the ones that went for the year, I think there was like 2% reoffending. And it just made you realise that it wasn't even about money, right? It wasn't even about, like being the baddest guy on the block and stuff like that. It was just, when they say people just want something to do, it was something to do that made them feel that they had some kind of worth, some kind of purpose, some kind of ambition. Those things mean more to an individual because that's what gets you up in the morning, right? And I saw this program, I thought, oh my God, this is amazing, this is fantastic. And I went up to the lady and I said, oh, you've got to take me to the pledge. And he goes, oh, it's been cut, the program's been cut, that's it, it's done, but these are the figures. And so that's kind of what I feel like. I feel that there needs to be, the same way we have a concentrated approach in terms of allocating what sentence goes to what crime and what happens to people and where they get put away, and we go, right, we've taken the bad guys off the street, there has to be that same calculated approach to be able to say, what measures are there in each correctional institution that will allow the people who want to make a change to be able to make a change and have society be able to embrace it. That's my time. Thank you very much.
Mr. G will be back at the end with a special poem for us, I understand, but also to respond to some of the questions. Now, we've sent a number of questions, and I'm going to try and get through as many as I can. I'm not going to ask each member of the panel to respond to each, but I'll pick out people to respond to particular ones. But I wanted to start first with you, Aileen, talking about, well, any general thoughts you had from some of those presentations, but also particularly, we had a number of questions about support and education. And I think this is something that you could talk about, particularly in how we, one question was, is crime learned? And if so, how do we prevent it in the first place? And then, how do we use education and support mechanisms, whether that's illiteracy or other activities, to help people not reoffend and not? So do you want to talk us a little bit through that?
Yeah, thanks very much. I absolutely support the view that actually rehabilitation is a must. It's not an option for us as a society. And that it's not just about punishment, it's also about care and support for those individuals. And so much is about supporting that individual to find hope and purpose in life. So important. And also to understand a bit about the background of the individual and the work that we do at Second Step, and particularly at Golden Key, where we work with people with complex needs, offending backgrounds, homelessness, mental health needs, drug and alcohol needs. Is really understanding actually that people have got there through very different paths, but also that they have likely to have had significant life events, especially as children, and that it's really important that we try and understand and support individuals to be able to talk about some of the complex trauma that they experience. And that's something that I believe very strongly that as a society that we need to be able to do is support. Be able to support children and young people to be able to vocalise and talk about the complex trauma that they're experiencing. Somebody at a conference that we held last year around homelessness said the child may be the victim, the adult is seen as the problem, and it's really about making those connections and really find compassion in our hearts to work with the individual to be able to talk about that complex trauma. And what's really shocking about the number of people in the criminal justice system is the number of people who've got pre-existing problems. So there's high numbers of people with dyslexia. Mental health needs is really high. Sue mentioned about women experiencing domestic violence, but also high numbers of people who have been abused as children, and high numbers of people who have got mental health needs, and relating to that, drug and alcohol needs. So we have to do so much more to identify what those issues are, and to be working in a preventative way. So around, I don't know whether the crime is learned, but if you've been in a family situation where there's been a lot of domestic violence and there's been child abuse going on, then that's not an environment where people are going to necessarily thrive. And we have to support individuals to recover themselves in those situations. So it's very much about working early intervention, helping schools to identify kids with complex trauma, having services to support those in order to prevent, enable people to recover themselves in that. Very much it's about supporting those people to identify their needs. And one of the things that we have to do is to put more resources into prison around mental health care and around social care. It's really not enough resources going in there, so that's absolutely essential if we are to help people to recover. So in terms of supporting people, we've got some of the most vulnerable people are most likely to end up offending. So it's something that we're failing them as a society, and also the transition from adulthood into adulthood, and also young adults are most likely to offend. So supporting young people is absolutely essential in helping to prevent offending.
And Sue, there was a number of questions about prevention and whether we have got the right things in place to do this. And are there any interesting examples you can point to in terms of how we intervene earlier to prevent sentencing of people put in prison and so on?
I think there's a whole range. We've talked about the drugs education project, we've talked about SHE. I think the work that's being done on troubled families and is absolutely an essential part of that. We provide funding for organisations working with young people about making sure that there are diversionary activities for young people. Do you know, the more we talk about this, the more listening to you, G, is that actually this isn't complex, is it? And we do have to be very careful that we don't make it into, this is so difficult that we don't know how to do it. I think it is very easy in as much as we need dedicated resources, we need agencies to work together. One of the things that we've just started is a reducing reoffending board, where we have all the agencies coming together. So rather than thinking in silos, rather than thinking that what they can do for their bit of their slice of the perpetrator, is how can we tackle the whole thing together? From prevention is obviously key, and the support. And I think that is the way forward. I think one of the things that we all have an issue because we are all have fewer resources than we did have. I think some of the organisations, particularly with the way that probation has been split, I think that we now have, for those who don't know, we have this was government imposed, we have a national probation service, and then we have communication, working links, which is private sector. But the important thing is that there's been a split, and I think that although I was very positive for what the government was doing about supporting people who were who'd come out of prison only serving less than 12 months, who'd never had support before. only today I was reading that that support can sometimes be a phone call every 6 weeks. That's not good enough. That's not how you are going to persuade someone to change behaviour by having that. So I think the dynamics of having two organisations now managing offenders has actually contributed to an increase in problems.
And that's very useful. You've answered two of the questions which were also put forward about joined up thinking and also about the National Probation. But I want to ask Andy as well about, do you think the National Probation Service works from your point of view?
So a few comments to make that I wanted to express a view on Andrew, but I don't think people are fallen bad. I think that we learn a lot of things in policing, but I think we become experts in what it is to be human. And G chimed with me what he was saying. The guys at the back in uniform, why do they do what they do? Why do they go the extra mile? They do it for three reasons. They do it because they want to make a difference. They do it because they have an optimism that they can make a difference and they have some hope. And they do it because of this human condition and kindness. Actually, that's what G was giving guys in prison. He was giving them a meaningful purpose. He was giving them some optimism that things could be improved, and he was being kind towards them. And actually, wow, that's not hard, is it? And so I think there is a great risk that we overcomplicate things. It would be wrong of me to throw snowballs at the National Probation Service. I mean, they in my opinion, they've their life wrung out of them, and it's amazing they do anything. Their performance managed in their volumetrics, they touch people lightly and infrequently. I struggle to see where it makes a difference a lot of the time, but I don't think it's their fault.
Okay, thank you. I want to come on to, we had a lot of questions about support and education. I want to particularly ask Mr. G and Aileen about this. So, do you think we do enough to help people from actually entering the cycle of crime?
To actually what?
Do we do enough to stop people from entering the cycle of crime?
I don't know, because I guess the reasons why people would enter the cycle of crime, sometimes it goes back to home, it goes back to poor education, poor life choices. I'm not from Bristol, but I know in London the gang situation is quite peak at the moment. I think that it's trying to, I guess, give people a sense of options and a sense of purpose, because especially like say in a gang situation where the belonging they feel from joining a gang is they're getting the love they probably didn't get at home, right? And you have these older individuals that can be quite manipulative. I mean, think about it when you were like, I don't know, hard to imagine, but once upon a time you used to once upon a time you saw little dude running around Bristol or wherever you're running around, right? And no, but I'm just saying, like, if an older kid just came up to you and just says, oh, come play football with us or something like that, that feeling of like, yeah, right? Because when people imagine joining a gang, they imagine it's something of like some huge, massive initiation. No, it starts off very, very gently, very, very, but there's this sinister aspect to it. And trying to, again, it all comes back to resources, because they shut down the youth clubs, they shut down so many things, collections, those things, apprenticeships have gone down. So the things that would have given people, especially young teenagers or pre-teenagers, that sense of purpose and belonging, where there is a supervisory adult there to make sure that things aren't getting out of hand, those things have been cut. And so nature abhors a vacuum. So then you just get other individuals that will come in, and that can then lead someone into a life of crime. But then again, we've also got the people using violence to solve solutions. And because of what I do is very much to do with like articulation and very much to do with words, what I always tell the guys is I always say, let the paper take the pain. Let the paper take the pain. So whatever pain you're feeling, rather than go to these, right, put it down on a piece of paper and you'll find it's cathartic. And sometimes just something as simple as that allows them to realise, oh, I don't need to always be fighting. So there's a lot in our culture that is destructive.
Aileen?
Some of the things that we know is that it's very much about how to enable people to have hope and purpose, and about strong relationships, and that sense of purpose and actually feeling valued is so important, and that's what we have to
financial problems, we don't have enough money. But what about things like, are things joined up effectively for you to work?
Well, so Golden Key, one of the purposes of Golden Key is to enable system change. So although we're delivering a coordinated service, so working with people with complex needs, the other thing that we're doing is identifying what lots of barriers are and identifying where there needs to be system change, and that's the purpose of the programme. And just as a good example, around release from prison, that can go really well, but often it can go very badly. So one of the people that we were working with, we were visiting him in prison, and the services had all been coordinated to support his release. And then his release was brought forward a week and nobody knew, and he was just released. And that just completely devastated all the plans that had been in place, and that seemed like such a no-brainer really. It's like you've got all the services working together, but actually the release happened on a day that nobody knew was going to happen. It got changed at the last minute, and sometimes people get released on Friday afternoons. So why release people on Friday afternoons? So sometimes the system does not work together very well, and that transition point from prison into the community is such a vulnerable time in terms of ensuring that people have got housing, that they've got their benefits, entitlements, all that in place, and just that change the date can completely set someone up onto the wrong pathway. So there's some very basic things that could be done to change things that would actually reduce a lot of issues.
I would sorry, do you?
No, I was just about to say that. Just if you want to focus on some of the things that I've seen work, which have been on a very, very small level, there's a thing called Clink restaurants. I know they've got them at Highdown Prison. I know they've got them at Brixton, and that was set up by I've forgotten the guy's name. He was like some super Michelin star chef, and he decided to set up a restaurant where you go inside the prison and you can have a top meal. I'm talking top. Forget Bake Off and all them other things and whatever, right? Master Chef, right? We're talking you could have a top meal. And in order for the prisoners to be able to be in the kitchens and be able to serve, they've got to literally be the best of the best in terms of like there's going to be they're going to be A model prisoners. And so they've got something to work towards, and they get an accreditation, and then they can get jobs on the outside. But in my knowledge, I think there's only 2 prisons that actually do stuff like that. And so it really needs someone to literally sit down with a blank piece of paper and look at different institutions and just say, right, what can we do? Because even what's his name? Who's that guy? Gordon Ramsay, when he did the Brixton Bad Boys Bakery, right? That's still running. That's still running right now. There's still the guy who's still baking the program's done. You guys have finished watching it, but it's still going on, right? And people in Brixton are buying cakes and stuff like that are made by prisoners on the inside. And so that transition point from coming out and entering society, as you said, it's a very vulnerable time. Because that's where, is it recidivism? That's the name they give for it, when you keep going back inside. That's where it occurs, where once you come outside, you're used to being institutionalized, and suddenly you're free. What do you then do? So I think the things I've seen that have worked are ones that have been very, very well thought out and well planned. And Sue,
Yeah, I think we've got to also be careful with it. I think we just let's just copy what works, rather than thinking that we've got to invent it in our backyard, otherwise it's not ours. And the Restore Trust are looking at doing the same thing in New Gloucester. I think we've got the building, so we're nearly there. But what we've all got to do, and I think it's really interesting that what Aileen said, is that we've got to work together, all the agencies, and that comes from the Reducing Reoffending Board. We've brought people together who maybe in the past will have worked in silos, and to be fair to all the organisations and agencies, they tend to be funded in silos. And if we're going to make a difference on reducing reoffending, we have to get better at communication. And so with the board we've got prisons, we've got probation, we've got various agencies and so on. And what we've also got to do though is share funding, because we have to think of the greater good and not just look at our own profit and loss of our own bit of organisation, because some things that someone can do is actually going to save another organisation. So if we come together and we work together, we will actually be able to deliver a much, much better service rather than thinking this is just mine and I'm not going to pay for this because I'm actually going to save money down the road. I mean, one of the things that we've done, which is just slightly off piece, is that because the police do so much work with mental health, is that we now fund the mental health nurses working in the call centre, and that has, you know, not only has it reduced the work that's for the police, but it means that the police are being able to use that information that the mental health nurse is giving to make really great interventions and make a real difference. Now, if we were precious about who funded what, then it wouldn't be done, but because we've been able to all pool resources together, we've all been able to, with clinical commissioning groups, we've all been able to pool resources and make a real difference.
Well, that's a very good. We are out of time in terms of the specific questions. I know that there are a number of other questions which were submitted. I know that where we know the people who submitted them, we are going to respond to them. So if you did ask a question and we haven't had a chance to ask it tonight, we will be responding to you. And similarly, the Police Commissioner's Office is always open to receive other questions and so on. So please do ask those. Before I round up, we did promise that Mr. G would read a poem for us. So okay. You're going to come and do that? You coming here?
It's inspired by Martin Luther King. I'm a big fan of Martin Luther King, and for any of you that are aware of his speeches, he did a speech just a few hours before he got shot, where he says, I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land, and I want to let you know one day we as a people will get to the promised land. So this poem was inspired by that speech, and this poem is called Go Tell It on the Mountain. I caught the falling feather of an angel's wing, and I wanted it tattooed upon my spine. Now you can call me a devil or a demonic thing. Who cares for names if I can fly? Who cares for names if I can rise and claim what's rightfully mine? Beyond the foot of this crooked mountain which casts a haze upon my life. You know it's impacting how I'm living. You know it's exact and unforgiving. It traps my soul within a box and it holds a lock to my living. I just want to float away so high. I just want to break the colour lines. I want to break the minimum wage and slavery, break the cannons, guns and knives, and I can escape the prison time. Escape the trips to courtroom trials. That I can rewind the school exclusions when daddy leaves and mommy cries. Am I wrong to want to escape this plight? These angel wings can be in sight. They levitate my mental state to leave these shackles far behind, but fallen wings leave scattered feathers. And I tried my best to just collect them, but they were spread out so far apart. To unite them all would take forever. So I gathered just what I could. Looked to the stars from where I stood, that I could leave behind this mountain, behind this city, behind this hood, behind this street, behind this road, behind this path that leaves me cold. I'll fly so high that they'll find me. I'll never go back to the days of old, but as I flap and flap and flap, there are no wings upon my back. There is no magical elevation. My puppet strings are still attached. I raise my eyes up to the sky. I look way beyond this mountain high. I look to the heavens and just ask why this world won't get off my back and let me fly. But I'm stuck at the bottom of my regrets. With that single feather that I now possess, one day we'll reach that mountaintop. But we'll have to do it step by step. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. G. Just a couple of short announcements. This is part of the Bristol Festival Ideas. There are many more events coming up. There's brochures outside and there are more on our website. But do sign up to our mailing list or follow our social media feeds because we announce new events all the time. And those who do will get a special email tomorrow with a very special event we're announcing for June. So watch out for that coming into your inboxes tomorrow. I think it would be helpful if we could have the slides which we could put on our website so that we could use those if you're willing to let us have those. Obviously this is the start of a discussion. It's been a very successful start. We should do this every year, I think, so let's work together on that. Thank you so much for coming, and would you thank our guests, Sue Mountstevens, Andy Marsh, Aileen, Edwards and Mr. G. Thank you very much.